It is said that Einstein couldn't swim, which I don't know what that means. By certain metrics, I can't swim either then. I have this thing with my nose where I really cannot hold my breath underwater without plugging my nose. And so, as you can imagine, this creates a major issue when trying to swim. As it sits today, I can swim doing the breaststroke and other strokes as well, I suppose, most comfortably doing the breaststroke by keeping my head above water. So I can still enjoy swimming, and I do it leisurely. And I did it a lot when I was in Iceland. Is that what they mean when they say that Einstein couldn't swim? I really don't understand what that means, and I think we need a better consensus out in the world for what it means when we write things like somebody cannot swim. Is it not the case that humans all naturally have the ability to swim, but some of us just have not developed it? It's like if you cannot read, you're illiterate, but you still have the ability to learn how to read. Einstein's favorite composer was Mozart, and he would perform Mozart the violin. Einstein played the violin. I think that that's very well known and popular about Einstein, and it contributed to his character, to his role that he played. There is a passage here we can read. When Einstein first came to Princeton, okay, so Einstein left Europe when Germany became unlivable for him. Okay, we know that history. But I was always curious, like, what was that like for him? And it was cool to imagine America back in the day as this beacon for people, specifically, in Einstein's case, scientists who had a Jewish ethnicity. Einstein didn't really follow the Jewish religion. Still, it was his ethnicity, so he couldn't get away from, right, his looks just sort of labeled him as a Jew, and he sympathized with his fellow Jews, connecting with them as a part of his genealogy. He connected with them as brethren. Einstein had to leave Germany and then eventually just left all of Europe during that time, and America was like this beacon of freedom where he could pursue his creative intellectual ideas even if he couldn't swim. Now, Einstein and Mozart, he wrote of Beethoven being too personal. Beethoven expressed himself too much. I think back in the day when classical music was sort of the standard, that's just kind of what everyone listened to, I think you could really have opinions about this composer or that composer. Today, as it sits, for me at least, there are different pieces that I prefer. But when I look at the great composers of history, Beethoven, Mozart, I don't have an opinion one way or another. I don't say that I dislike this composer or that composer. I think all of them are absolutely incredible. Different ones have different styles that I prefer to listen to at different times, but to sit through a classical concert hearing any piece by any of these great composers of history is profound, and I just have awe and reverence to all of them. So I don't have an opinion like Einstein did. Nevertheless, Einstein definitely played a role, and he was conscious and aware of his role. He was seen, I think this was like his first trip to New York. The press reported about him showing up looking like a bohemian artist, wearing an overcoat with uncombed hair, and carrying his violin case. He looked more like a bohemian artist than a, top physicist. Einstein was able to make his rumpled genius image as famous as Chaplin did The Little Tramp. So Charlie Chaplin, Charlie Chaplin, is that right? Or was it Chapman? Okay, Charlie Chaplin, The Little Tramp. I don't really know what that image is. The Little Tramp. Tramp is such a weird word that I don't even understand. I think of Frank Sinatra's song, and I just don't get what they meant when they said tramp back in those days. Einstein was kindly yet aloof. So this is the paradox of him. Brilliant yet baffled. He floated around with a distracted air and a wry sensibility. He exuded honesty to a fault, was sometimes but not always as naive as he seemed. He cared passionately about humanity, and sometimes even about people. He would fix his gaze on cosmic truths and global issues, which allowed him to seem detached from the here and now. This role he played was not far from the truth, but he also enjoyed playing it to the hilt, knowing that it was such a great role. And this gets into as well as Einstein enjoyed publicity. And actually, from this passage on, it talks about when he was first in Princeton, which at that time they didn't know. Was he going to stay there just for 6 months as a visiting professor, or would he make it something much greater? And as it turns out, Einstein would end up living in Princeton for the rest of his life after he first went there. Princeton was kind of like this European institution in America, so he enjoyed the freedom of thought expression, which America allowed, the culture, the society of it allowed at that time, but also this connection to history. Princeton was set up, I think, in the 1700s, maybe later 1700s, but anyways, it did have this long-standing history. The architecture was Gothic, like a European institution, so it gave kind of the best of these both worlds. And Einstein found peace there, had long walks in the park. You know, you can visualize this in the Oppenheimer movie, right? That was Einstein much later in his life, towards the end of his life, encountering Robert Oppenheimer. Yeah, that's kind of a great visual of Einstein as the aloof, kind of old professor at that time. Einstein and music, right? So I have a clarinet here, which I cannot play for a couple reasons. One, I don't know how to play the clarinet, but two, it doesn't have a reed in it, so there's nothing to come out. Music. Einstein played the violin, though, and he played it here in a benefit recital in Manhattan for 264 guests who all paid $25 apiece to attend. It featured Bach's concerto for two violins in D minor and Mozart's G major quartet, and it was even open to the press. And when Einstein was first at Princeton, the person who recruited him there was named Flexner, forget the first name, and Flexner was trying really hard to make Einstein avoid any encounters with the press, even declining on Einstein's behalf a visit to the White House to meet Roosevelt. Einstein somehow had correspondence with Eleanor Roosevelt, and then also, interesting enough, with Queen Elizabeth of Belgium. And so at this point, he was so connected to like incredibly powerful people. Einstein was at the tippity top of status, I guess you could say, of power, if you want to look at social structures in that sort of a way. All the while, he couldn't swim. Now that is only relevant here in that Einstein sailed. Einstein had a childlike delight about taking small risks. He never took a life jacket with him when he sailed, even though he could not swim. Einstein sailed, and this is also something that plays up to his image. He would be kind of aloof and distracted. When he went out sailing, he didn't have the technical expertise. He just kind of did it on a whim, on intuition. And as he sailed, sometimes he would run ashore. Sometimes he would be out and there'd be a storm, and people on land would be thinking, what the hell, where are you, Einstein? He would jot down random equations, which I look at almost as like Einstein writing poetry, which we can finish this video on a note. The reason I'm diving into Einstein's life in this sort of a way, I'm trying to learn a couple things. One, I was very interested in how did Einstein deal with the political, geopolitical, incredible tensions of his life. Mainly in the latter half of his life, after he was 50 years old, there was so much going on in the world. One, quantum physics was throwing a wrench in his understanding of the laws of nature and the cosmos, right? God does not play dice. Spooky action at a distance. You can look into those if you're curious. Or I just recommend everyone to read his biography, honestly. It's been very insightful. I've been reading some other sources of Einstein too. One of the bathroom books I had in Hofsós. That is a town, a village really, a hamlet almost, in North Iceland, where I lived for a summer, in a cabin surrounded by books. And while I was there, I encountered several different books of Einstein about him. One was his correspondence, so letters that were sent to him. That was the bathroom book, actually, that I would read. I realized that Einstein was a figure that the poet who lived and owned the house where I was living in, who died well before I lived there, but nevertheless somehow became a mentor to me, even though I never got to meet him, but I was living in his house and got to read through his books. And there were certain figures that were common across his bookshelves that I thought would be interesting people that I ought to learn about. And this poet named Bill Home was kind of like Einstein in his aloof sort of a way. But instead of jotting down equations and thinking about physics, he would jot down poems and think about prose. He also enjoyed music, and Joseph Haydn and Bach seemed to be his two favorites. Now, Bach and Haydn were also popular for Einstein too. So these two figures were almost like very similar in different ways. And so that's why I'm diving into learning about Einstein. I think it's very important because I have this personal connection now, but then also I'm trying to figure out how do these thinkers that are so different than typical people navigate tumultuous times, because I think the greatest thing that we can learn today is how to navigate the world when things seem black and white. Things seem purple or orange. You're either this or that, either or. You have to choose this side or that side. Well, I feel like Einstein never chose one side or the other. He kind of navigated in this middle ground, this third perspective. And then finally, I think it's also important because when you think about historical figures, if you imagine this right here as a bust of Einstein, even of Mozart too, but specifically I would say of Einstein because he is someone that we think of as kind of the quintessential scientist. Few people probably didn't know that he couldn't swim until now. Yeah, I think it's important to understand the complexity and nuance of different figures that we know of, and that become kind of cliches in the world. We need to understand the complexities and who they really were instead of just, doing the quoting and hand waving and this and that. I guess I do also think it's important to learn how to swim, though.